Hey there, it's been some time. I took myself on another walk, this time a little bit higher up. I've been thinking many things as I've been on this journey of bringing my service, the tarot, from a perspective that is looking to empower more of myself, more of others, more in others. And I've been feeling kind of at odds, let's say, because the more that I get to know this world, this reality, the more I get to know people, the more I realize sometimes I get stuck in my own designs, in my own projections about what life can be, what it ought to be. And sometimes I resent my circumstances. I end up feeling sad about being far away from my loved ones, my partner, my family. And sometimes I have to take myself on a walk like this, to put things into perspective. And that's what I've been trying to reach out, to more people. Just say, hey, there's probably a different perspective that you're not considering at the moment. There's probably a way in which you're looking at your life that is not serving, that is not working, that even, it's like I've met people with lots of money and people with, that can barely make it. And we all have something in common, that beyond anything that can bring some relief to our suffering, coming from our shortcomings, it's like not being privileged enough, to be able to get to, maybe travel some more, get to know more of the world and see more sights. Some other people don't ever leave their hometown, and they don't know much, and we have tools like this, like the phone I'm holding in my hand to record myself. Now we have AI, now we have, technology that can fabricate images, videos, people in many different contexts. And so our perception of reality is becoming more distorted. And what happens as a result of that is that our senses, which are our receptors, where we get all of the inputs from the outside, right? So it's like we have outer senses and inner senses, right? Outer senses, the five that we know, and then we have other inner senses that can help us make sense and discern, what's going on internally, externally. So that basically makes it that we have an inner environment and an outer environment. So sometimes people place themselves in different outer environments, but their inner environment is still a mess, you know. And I just want to stop for a bit so you can see where I'm at. Okay. And so the idea with this video is to say, well, what is it that I do with the tarot? You know, what I've been trying to do mostly, and through my own practice, the practice that I've developed like over the years, as I've been walking in places like this, you know, in mountains, next to rivers, among people, you know, sleeping in a tent for 4 years. I've gone through a lot, and right now I'm looking to move to different places, you know, within the Sacred Valley, just bringing my service, trying to introduce the tarot from a different perspective, because most of the times people just have this concept of tarot that you will know the future, that it can tell you about your destiny, and people sometimes just like, oh no, I don't want to know, you know. I mentioned that before. And so what tarot can really do, it can help you do, you know, it as a tool that it is, just not an absolute, you know. It was still created by an intelligence. We have intelligence to be able to discern, to be able to pay attention to what helps, what supports more life, what creates more wellness, you know. And so as I've been digging into the tarot, I've been paying attention that my perception of the world has improved. It has expanded. It has been able to accommodate within my awareness the presence of different realms of existence. So I'm going to elaborate more on that on another video probably. But the main point with this is that the tarot can help you calibrate your senses. What do I mean by that? So the senses, as I said, they are inputs, and they can basically, like if they are distorted, if they're not functioning at their most, how can I say that? At their factory settings, let's say. You know, it's like the senses that you got when you were born. You know, it's like as you grow old, they become, some become numb, some just go into places that have been buried by trauma, by, you know, very shocking experiences that, you know, you just get to perceive certain, let's say, a spectrum of reality within what you're able to perceive. So sometimes even when you're in a place that is so big, you know, the world is a sentient being, it's a living, breathing being, and we sprout out of it, you know, all the rest of the beings that are here, we all come from the same source. So how come some people believe their lives are to be lived in a cage within 4 walls, you know, when the world is so big? So the restrictions that people put in their own minds, you know, the ways in which the senses have become sometimes more attuned to perceive other bandwidths, or, you know, because it's all vibration frequency. So we perceive a certain spectrum within that bandwidth that allows us to, you know, just get as much as it can trigger the senses without creating a new shock or a sense that you are gonna come into another shock again. So this body is so intelligent that it knows already how to program itself to prevent itself from another similar shock. And so the mind works in a way that it programs itself into a distortion to avoid pain, to avoid suffering, to avoid hurt, to avoid having to come across, the same person that hurt you, or, the upbringing that wasn't perfect, and so therefore it couldn't provide you with all of your needs, as a child. And so we've been getting it all distorted since we are children. I've previously talked about the war, the genocide. It's like how many people have to die so ruthlessly. It's really painful to see that, and to know that while I'm here next to running water, plenty of water, and in a place like Peru that has plenty of food, and these people have been deprived of that because it serves a bigger, more sinister game, more sinister agenda. And so who are the ones that are taking the whole brunt of this? Children. So if you get a child traumatized, you can't control that child's perspective for life. You can't control what that child is going to aim for, and the level of resentment that child is going to hold for himself. Holding in some sinister illness of the heart, that poisons the soul. And so just growing all of that resentment just for some greed, it's not right. So we all have, all become aware at some point that we're suffering different perspectives of this, no matter where we are. Sometimes, more horses. So sometimes we get the trauma from not being validated, not being praised, not being acknowledged, not having our emotions met with understanding, with compassion, with kindness. Sometimes we grow with avoidant parents because they as well were traumatized, about that. Everybody comes with something. And so the main idea of this is that tarot is based on symbols. So these symbols are unchanging. I mean, they can be interpreted in many ways depending on the interpreter, and there's so many decks out there that some even depict cats in them, and that's all cute, whatever, but when you go to the core symbolism of it, you mainly deal with planetary energies, numbers, and cosmic laws, divine laws. You have elementals, and as it all happens, as we all perceive it, we get to, glimpse into different aspects of this as we grow, as we become more attuned to things. And so the tarot can help you say, okay, well, here is what I perceive that's going on in your present moment, in your present reality. This isn't about the future we can infer about the future based on what's going on right now, and we can tell about the past in the way that we can be as present for you as interpreter, for the consultant, we can be as present as we are present for ourselves, right? And so from there, depending on how the interpreter has calibrated himself or herself, we will be able to get to see more of the person's overall spectrum as it is portrayed in the cards. And so all of these different attributes and magnitudes and just energetic currents are depicted in symbols. And so all of those serve as a map, let's say. So at the moment that there is a spread in front of you, so you get a bigger perspective, of where you're at in your present moment, time and space, relationships, what threads have you been weaving along your journey, and how does it look like, the pattern of your own weaving as you move forward. So sometimes the pattern is so chaotic that almost tripped. Stepped on a little stone. And so it's mostly how these cosmic energies, thinking about the law that you exist, that you were born, being innocent as a fool, that has no concept of right and wrong, that is just trying to live an experience. He's the first experiencer, and so the idea is to keep with that inner child, at all times, having enough awareness, like having developed enough of your own awareness to pinpoint what is coming from innocence, what is coming from that child, that it still holds wonder and awe for nature and reality, and what is the wounded person that grew up, feeling all of these things and perceiving that needs to defend himself, herself, that needs to protect this or that needs to amass this much of this or this much of that, hoarding stuff. And so it's all, for some people, like, reality is very stark, and for some others they're just holding this awareness of bliss and contentment, and they just want to stay there, while some other people are freaking suffering. Some people are starving to death. And so it's cool, to touch the sense of bliss, to touch on a sense of contentment, of a wholehearted embrace, that only the earth can give you. If you surrender to it, there are many different ways to go for connection and for cleansing the channels, the senses, cleansing the inputs so they recalibrate themselves. Some people need harder shocks, so sometimes they go for plant medicine. Sometimes they go for cannabis, and that's another topic, but people sometimes, to reach constantly that sense of contentment and bliss and whatnot, they abuse their own medicine, their own practices, to keep themselves in that state where everything is perfect, where everything is, oh yeah, I'm so cool, for bringing myself here. I have so much knowledge, and I've meditated so much, and I've been in this many temples, and I've been with this many shamans and whatnot. But if a part of you still behaves like shit, with other people, and you're just on a journey of self-serving, your own agendas, your own hidden motives and purposes. You know, it's like, well, at what point are you gonna stop and look at yourself and say, how am I playing a part in all of this? You know, how am I myself contributing, you know, to this mess? You know, no matter where I am, it's like I'm not saying I'm just gonna go right now to Gaza and, you know, or join a march, a protest, you know, to make a difference. You know, this is my way of making a difference. You know, it's like, it's been so hard for me to just speak up for what I believe in, and in a way that, you know, I can convey more clearly. You know, I had to elevate my speech by just, you know, bringing myself to remote places up in the mountain, whatnot, to be isolated from people, you know, just enough to pay attention to myself, you know, to pay attention to my own shit, to my own story, to the ways in which I had been constantly deluding myself and trying to put up a front, you know, like still trying to wear on that mask. And I said, oh, I was a victim of this, you know, and people don't get me, people don't receive me, people, you know, and I became very scolding at some point of the ways of people, and that wasn't cool, because that was distancing me from all of you who are watching this now. And so, yeah, well, things have been constantly developing, you know, and along that path, let's say, I think, as I said at the beginning, you know, like I've been developing my own practice for improving my attunement. You know, it's all about the attunement. You know, it's like a radio dial. You know, you just have to pay attention and, like, you know. And so meditation is definitely a must in whichever way you find meditation helpful and useful to you. There are active meditations, passive meditations, you know, you get to choose. And so I'm gonna sit down, actually, because I've been talking a lot. And so, yeah, I'm just gonna sit here in the shade. And so, yeah, just want to pay more attention to this message, because I don't want to miss the point. But yeah, it's like there's so much I haven't shared of myself, of what this journey has been, and yeah, it has been challenging like hell. And I've had to break myself my own way, you know. I've had to learn how to take the reins of my own life and teach myself new ways, and ways of talking to people, ways of relating to people, you know, that all had to begin with myself, with the way that I talk to myself and relate with myself, you know, with my inner child, the one that was wounded, the one that had to cope, you know, with many different behaviors and mechanisms, you know. And eventually, as we grow, you know, it's like they become designs, and we end up attaching an agenda, you know. So it helps put a band-aid on the hurt that keeps on ripping off every time that we encounter a situation with, you know, either a person or an environment, you know, that challenges us again and exposes that wound. And so we go for relief. Some people have been tired enough already of just going for temporary reliefs, and some people just continue abusing their medicine. So that's not cool. So what I'm trying to bring here is a way to integrate, you know, a way to reflect, a way to observe yourself, you know, from the perspective of someone that has walked the talk. In this sense, you know, it's like I've been really digging into myself to be able to be as congruent, as coherent, and as present with myself, just so I would be able to even come up with the words that come up that I'm just communicating in this video. And so yeah, it's been a lot that I've been holding on because I've been believing that I don't have, I'm not ready yet, you know, that I still need to work on stuff, you know, that people aren't ready. You know. That's another thing that I get, that I stumble upon every time, you know. It's like every time that I just introduce myself and have to just, you know, asking from the simple questioning. It's like, do you like tarot? What do you think tarot is about? And asking for a chance, you know. It's like 5-10 minutes. Let me change your mind. Let me help you change your mind. But not in a way that I want to convince you of anything, but just I want for you to just pay attention to yourself, to the things that you might be silently still agreeing with yourself that it's okay, that is normal to live in a certain way, that keeps you constricted, shrinked, you know, contracted, fearful, resentful, angry, anxious, overwhelmed, burnt out. You know, there are so many different expressions of this. Abandoned, neglected, you know. I've seen so many people's scars, and I've listened to their wounds, and I've seen them cry so many times, and I've been receiving these heartfelt hugs that I haven't received from one single friend. You know, it's like at that moment after that hug, it's like we become friends. You know, and right now I can say I have many friends. You know, those people that still listen, you know, to these things and still pay attention to what I put out there, you know, in whatever state of mind I'm in, you know. And so the point of this video, just to wrap it up, is to say your circumstances don't have to dictate your state of being. Your circumstances, no matter how harsh, you know, they can dictate the perception of your own sovereignty, of your own individuality, of your own power, inner power, just for being human, just for being you. You know, for having a voice, for having a body that can take you places. You know, and how you care for yourself, how you care for your body says how much you care for your relationships and your environment. You know, some people might display this abundance, you know, and their inner self is so neglected, you know, because they just try to keep up with an outer, pretty, you know, lavish, lush, you know. You can make as many houses and have a lush garden, you know, around it, and you can feel miserable. You can create castles, you know, and feel like, you know, you just walking among ghosts. And so what's the point of all of that? You know, if we keep on neglecting, you know, what makes us human, you know, what makes us sentient beings, that we feel, we sense so much, you know, and there's so many more senses that we don't even explore, and they've been there the whole time. You know, just telling you, you are more than what you believe you are. There's so much more. And so that's what pisses me off, you know, sometimes, and I just hear people saying just some, you know, repeating some bullshit, you know, and it's like they don't believe it, but they just say it to convince themselves that that's what their life is about. You know, I'm like, you know, it's okay to judge sometimes. You know, you can discern. Like, judgment is a tarot card. You know, it's used for discernment. It is used for that moment of reckoning. You know, in which you know what goes, what continues, what does not. You know, what reaches, what takes you to the level of completion, what takes you to the level of fulfillment. You know, to say, I am one with the universe. You know, the universe is in me. It's like there's so many things that are overlooked, and they just, you know, they're repeated in mantras, they're repeated in ceremonies, you know, in rituals, as if they are the thing, but they're not living it. You know, They believe themselves to be so privileged because they're hoarding some knowledge that they can charge for. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I charge for my service, you know, because I have to eat. I have to put a roof over my head, and I have to wear clothes, and I want to take myself to more places. You know, I want to reach more people. That's the thing. I want to improve myself, and by delivering this service, you know. But the more that people believe that these tools, you know, oracular, oracle tools, like runes, for example. I don't do runes. Um, I do other stuff, but yeah, you know, mainly tarot. You know, it's like that. That's been my bridge, and that's what I want to introduce again. You know, by introducing myself here. You know, it's like my native language might be Spanish, and you know, I come from Colombia. I don't deny, you know, my origins, but I've learned how to speak English this much or this well or this, you know, in this way, so I'm able to reach more of you, you know, because this what I see that's happening in my country, you know, with our own issues, with our own problems, in our own, you know, cultures and traumas, you know, collective traumas in there. You know, it's like we live at other macro realities in this planet. You know, it's like if you neglect yourself at home, you're gonna neglect yourself no matter where you are. You know, and as much as people say, oh, money is important, you know, yeah, it enables more experiences. But then what are you doing with that money? You know, what purpose is it serving? You know, it's like, yeah, enhance yourself, better your life, improve, you know, your surroundings, give yourself good stuff. You deserve it. Yeah, but not at the cost of people. You know, not at the cost of just ignoring things and say like, oh yeah, well, at least I'm good. You know, at least I have my life all together. You know, so yeah, you can live like that and grow old like that, and it's still the world might be just crumbling on your deathbed. You know, and if you grow resentful because of because of the way that you chose to reach your own deathbed, you know, it's like this is a moment that you can start maybe. I hope with this video, you know, with these words, I might be able to reach that part of you, you know, that reaches that inner child of yours that says you can explore more of life, you can explore more of this world, you can continue being in awe, you know, you can learn how to trust again. You can learn how to, you know, establish new bonds. You can learn how to attune yourself in such a way that you do away with the distortion, that you push out the the the, the smoke, you know, that keeps you in a confusion, in a state of haze, you know, like just wondering, you know, like, oh, how am I gonna give myself next time this thing or that thing? You know, it's like it all comes as a consequence of where you put your attention. You know, where attention goes, energy flows, and all else is manifested. So wherever you put your words and the words that you use to describe your reality in the world around you, you know, that's where you take yourself, and that's what you conclude as the world to be. So if you want to conclude a different reality, a different, you know, which I perceive now to be a hyper reality, you know, it's like the more realms you're able to become aware of at the same time, you realize that this is a hyper reality. You know, sometimes you can access different realms within a higher reality through, you know, an experience with plant medicine, let's say, and that those are the moments, the mystical moments in which you say, oh, I'm one with everything. You know, but those mystical moments, you can learn that the medicine is there to teach you how to enable that within yourself at any point in time. If you really took the time to discern, you know, and integrate all of those teachings, you know, and not believe yourself, not believe your thought, not believe your mind, but just, you know, stay with the senses and tell you what is it that they're trying to communicate and what seems off. You know, you can start attuning and calibrating stuff. So, yeah, I don't want to make this any longer, but I just wanted to put it out there and yeah, just get this stuff out of my chest because yeah, I'm aiming for so much more in my personal life, you know, and the only way that I can do this, you know, is by healing my own inner child and telling that child you have a voice. And it doesn't matter if you weren't praised, if you weren't acknowledged or validated as a child, you know, it's like you can express yourself and somebody is gonna be there paying attention and listening. So I want to give you that same message, and I hope it helps. I hope it brings you some, you know, mirror that you can feel that you can feel as well yourself in, you know. So attune to your senses. I'm available. I have offerings available right now. You can book them in the link in my bio. Probably you're watching this on YouTube, you know, but you can reach me on Instagram. You know, you can go to Beacons.ai / lightweavertarot, and over there you can see all of my offerings, and you can book directly from there. All right. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for staying this long. And yeah, gotta keep on going. Got a big weekend ahead. See you soon. Cheers.